Hi everyone, my name is Michelle Friend. I am an attorney in Los Angeles, California, and I am a legal consultant for the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. I am very excited to be here with you today with the National Catholic Educational Association, and I'm grateful to Kevin Baxter for extending the invitation today. What I'd like to talk to you about are current events in the classroom. Negotiating elections, protests, the Supreme Court nomination, all these big events that are happening in the news, and whether or not we should talk about them in the classroom. I know some schools are very hesitant to address these issues, which have traditionally been part of our curriculum, but some people feel because of the way our country is so divided right now, and the way that people feel about politics right now, and different issues that are at the forefront, and the stress of the pandemic, that now is not the great time to discuss these issues in the classroom. And that's understandable. Kids are dealing with mental health issues, teachers are, every families are. There's lots of concerns we have in our society today. But there are also a tremendous amount of opportunities to discuss constitutional issues. So rather than thinking of it as something that cannot be discussed because it may encourage divisiveness or arguments, I challenge you to think of it in a different way. Think of all the opportunities we have today. The Constitution is in action every day. Turn on the news, there's always something going on. And most of it revolves around just the first three articles. Article 1 relating to the legislative branch, Article 2 relating to the executive branch, Article 3 relating to the judicial branch, and how they're interconnected. We also have First Amendment issues and protest rights and things like that. Lots of really meaty stuff to talk about with students. So I think it's really important to find a way to do that in a way that's respectful and encourages lots of thought and critical thinking about the things that are going on today. There's different ways that you can do that. Each of your schools are going to be different no matter where you are in the country. I have the perspective of, I've been living in Southern California for over 20 years now. California has a certain political sway, but I grew up in a swing state of Ohio. So I've seen both sides of that coin of how different the political climate can be in those kinds of situations. So what I like to start out with talking to you today is something that we've just been witnessing and is currently under debate, and that is the Supreme Court nomination process. As many of you I'm sure know, Amy Coney Barrett is our nominee. President Trump nominated her for the Supreme Court Justice position that was held by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Very controversial to a lot of people because of the differing viewpoints that the two individuals have. Very interesting from a precedent standpoint because of the timing, because we are currently in an election season and people have already started voting, and arguments as to whether President Trump should wait until after the election, whether he's entitled to nominate somebody right now, whether the Senate should hold the hearings. Really meaty stuff, and history is in the making right now on these issues. All kinds of great things to discuss with students, regardless of whether you like Amy Coney Barrett or not, or whether you agree with her political stance on things as it's been represented to us. Of course, as Catholics in a Catholic educational system, I'm sure we're all delighted that she's a Catholic nominee, and she's also a graduate and professor of one of our universities. Very interesting stuff to bring to light with our students. In fact, I think if you knew this, maybe some of you know this, that if she does become a Supreme Court justice, there are going to be 6 Catholics on the United States Supreme Court. Pretty fascinating thing. And historically, it's been a majority of Protestants, but today, now, if she gets accepted, then she will be the 6th. And they're coming from different areas. That's another thing that's really interesting to talk about. You have Sonia Sotomayor, who was appointed by a Democrat. And then you have the other justices, Chief Justice John Roberts, who was nominated by George W. Bush, who is considered to be conservative and is now considered a little bit more central. You have Samuel Alito, Clarence Thomas, and of course, most recently, Brett Kavanaugh. Fascinating time to consider, and I think given that we are Catholic institutions providing Catholic education, the fact that this is the case is really neat and really interesting for our students and to explain to them. There's a lot of reasoning and rationales and opinions as to why and how that came to be, that we have so many Catholics in that position. I saw Charles Camosi, from a professor at Fordham, quoted as saying, for many decades in the United States, Catholic schools were a much better option for serious students than were public schools. And in many cases, they still are. And that may be the case going forward. And I think it's important for students to know that their Catholic education and see where it can take them in the future. Other issues that are coming up, things that you can talk about in the election. Gosh, there's just so many. President Trump has indicated that perhaps if there were some concerns relating to voting, that he would be challenging in the Supreme Court, or challenging it in the courts, which would ultimately go to the Supreme Court. Not the first time that's happened. Of course, we saw that in Bush v. Gore, and it was very interesting and very controversial, fascinating stuff. Great opportunities to talk about those kinds of things and the interplay between the executive branch and the judiciary. Amazing separation of powers issues. And what happens, there's been some talk about this, of what happens if the presidency is not determined, and who from the the legislative branch would elevate to president, even if for a temporary basis. All this stuff is happening and is potentially happening in our country. Fascinating, meaty items to talk about with our students. Another interesting thing that's come to the forefront, in particular in this election, also in the last election, are some First Amendment issues relating to freedom of speech. Think about this for a moment. The First Amendment, which provides the freedom of speech, gives candidates for office an opportunity to advertise, talk about what they want to talk about, be it their issues or negative impacts that they feel about other people, their other candidates. It's often done, in the past, it's been done in newspapers, it's been done on television, it's been done by mailers in the mail. Well, we are entering into a time where people don't watch network television as much. It's fading away. A lot of the younger generation watches things like streaming services, Netflix or YouTube or whatever, that don't have necessarily advertisements. You have newspapers. People don't read newspapers like they used to. So you don't have those print ads coming into your home every day. Same thing with mail. People don't look at mailers as much. A lot of times people will take them and just throw them directly into the trash. So how are the messages getting to voters? And a big thing is social media. And kids, of course, students are very in tune with social media and the things and the issues surrounding that, and how they are influencing the election in a totally different way. And frankly, in a way that's far less expensive for the candidate. So what is that going to be going forward in future elections? Does it need to be the candidate that has the most money that can run? Because they don't need to buy television ads. They don't need to buy print ads, newspaper ads, etc. So we may see a shift in the forefront. It would be interesting to hear the students' viewpoints on that. I can tell you my own son asked me that very question, and it really made me think about it. He was curious why it's people with money that tend to run for president. Well, maybe that won't be the case going forward. We don't know. Interesting First Amendment issues. Something else you can do if things are, you feel too divided on the presidential election in your school, is just pick an issue, assign issues and assign a side. Doesn't have to be it's the side you believe in. It's just, here's your team of people. You're doing the pro, you're doing the against. It could be for a candidate. It can be for any kind of voter initiative, anything else on the ballot that you can have students really dig deep into and learn about and make an argument on each side. Another thing that I recommend is having a dialogue on how or why you choose a candidate. What are the important factors to you? Is it a person's character? Is it the issues they stand for? What are the things? Is it just like, I like how that person looks? What are the things that really make you want to vote for a certain candidate? And this could be done talking about the presidential election or your local elections, but it can also be done with mock candidates. So, for example, a teacher could say, here's the list of 15 or 20 different issues, and here, go into a small group and create your candidate, and what are the issues that they want to focus on, and what are their positions on them, and then have a mock election of the mock candidates. So that's another area that you can really focus on elections and how they work and what's important, and you're dealing with the real meaty issues that people can talk about. Now, something that I was involved in and have been many times is something called Dialogues on Freedom. It was a program that was established by the United States Supreme Court Justice Kennedy in response to the September 11th attacks. And we've done it every year in our town, it's through the LA County Bar Association as well as the Constitutional Rights Foundation. It's all across the country, something I encourage, because what it does is it's an annual event. You get to pick when. And what it does is it talks about different rights in the Bill of Rights. Something that you can do with that is they create scenarios, but you could also create your own. The program has different scenarios that would be unique to a student, that a student would relate to and understand. Something like, for example, what rights are involved if so-and-so got in trouble and then they had to have their locker searched? What rights are involved in that? Or so-and-so got in trouble and their phone was taken away and it was put into the principal's office and the parent was called. What rights are involved in that? Or different things like that. Or certain dress codes are popular of you can't wear certain colors, you can't wear, and a lot of this applies, of course, more to public schools than a school that might be a private school or that has a uniform. But the same issues are relatable to kids. And what happens, so for example, if different rights that might be involved in the Bill of Rights, if there's a party off campus and people hear about it and there's something that happens and it's posted on social media and then it's reported to the school, and what constitutional rights might be involved with respect to what the school can do versus vis-a-vis the students, things like that. So these are all issues that a student can really relate to. Something else that's very, very popular in the news and is really a lot of attention on, as we all know, is racial injustice. Now, I know the NCEA has had other speakers on this who are far more knowledgeable than myself, but I will say that it is an issue that has caused, that deserves attention. Whether you decide to address it in your school yourselves, or whether you have some kind of consultant or inclusion specialist come in, I think it's very important, because even though different families may have different views on these issues, the reality is it's very big deal in our society today. Some people, I can tell you, have pulled their kids out of school for racist issues. Some people, even I just had one today that they were upset because there was something coming home for Thanksgiving, and whether you should dress your child, a young child, can dress as a pilgrim or an Indian. Well, that was a big problem for the parent. Parent wanted to pull their child out of the school because They didn't like the history of the Pilgrim and the first Thanksgiving and how it was being portrayed. They didn't like the use of the word Indian, of course, because Native American is more appropriate, things like that. So these kinds of issues that maybe people didn't think about. Of course, in California, we have changed the name of Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. I know other states have done the same, but not all of them. So there's just a real shift in how people are thinking about things. And of course, this is very highlighted in the issues surrounding George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and such. There are a lot of things you can talk about on those issues, but they're very sensitive and but very important and very critical for children to understand at a young enough age so that when they grow, they can really delve deep into these issues. Some folks have talked about what is the difference between Black Lives Matter and what is defunding the police, and why are they two different extremes, and what does that mean? Really digging deep and understanding those issues. There's a lot of confusion about what defund the police means. There's a lot of confusion about why Black Lives Matters versus All Lives Matters and things like that. So talking about those issues, I think, is very important. Some ideas about how to deal with some of these issues that I've come across in different schools are the following. One is dealing with parents. I know a lot of schools have expressed concerns about they don't want to talk about any political or sensitive issues because they're concerned about parents. They're concerned about parents complaining. They're concerned about parents removing their kids from the school, all kinds of things. So I have seen schools, what they've done is send an email to parents in advance regarding the importance of these conversations and the need to not be divisive. Explaining the educational goals. Some goals that I've seen are to prompt and teach civil discourse and ethical debate, to empower the students to ask and challenge appropriately and feel safe and supported in doing so, and to promote respectful disagreement among friends and community members. Now, I've seen this done with people who set up rules, very strict online rules. A lot of schools are still teaching remotely if you're doing an online discussion forum, or even in person, very respectful, no name calling, things like that. People get excited about political issues. Some people feel really strongly about certain issues, and that's okay. But we learn a lot from those. But the important thing is to teach respect. Sometimes that's hard when we don't have the great examples of that on television, but that's okay. We don't have to rely on TV. We have ourselves and our own families and our own teachers and Jesus. So some folks have encouraged them to watch the debates and write about your observations. There's only one left on Thursday, and the assignment is set aside your feelings before the debate and make some observations. Another school I've seen has done where you have to list at least 5 positive things about each side that you learned at the debate. Sometimes that might be difficult for people, but you know what? There's a way you can do it. It doesn't have to necessarily be your personal belief. You can say positive things about it from an objective standpoint. Other things people have done, I talked earlier about mock elections. Again, providing candidates, and it could be a person or it could just be a platform, however they decide to do it. Mock elections were a big part of the educational system when I was growing up. I know that others have, and I know a lot of people are afraid to do them today. It's unfortunate. It really is. And even assignments. I still have my 4th grade Who Would You Vote for President project, which is actually kind of fun to look back at because I'm not so sure I would have voted the same way had that election been today. So it's just really interesting. These projects, these ideas are really important to talk about. The Black Lives Matter issues are very important to talk about. Some folks are talking about what is racism, what does it mean to be an anti-racist, all kinds of things like that. Very important to dig deep. What my parish is doing is something really unique and neat, is that as a community, we've gotten together. We have a fairly large African American population, And we're doing Zooms every 2 weeks to just talk about the issues in a safe place, and a lot of listening to how people are feeling. Very safe, very loving, always with a prayer. And so these, in the Catholic school system is a really good environment to practice that same kind of thing. And so hopefully we can make that happen. I'm going to close today with just a note of saying, history is happening right now. I'm borrowing that phrase from the musical Hamilton, but I think it fits perfectly. History is happening right now. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We have all this stuff going on, and I know everybody's working really hard on dealing with remote learning, hybrid format, who's healthy, who's washing their hands, what's the appropriate way, all these things, and everybody's stressful. But you know what? History is happening, and it's important to really teach our kids about all the things that are going on. And I think that they'll really, really gain a lot from that if we can give them that perspective. So I wish I was present with you all today. Unfortunately, we're only by Zoom, and I would love to have the opportunity to take questions. If you have any, I'm happy to entertain them, and I've provided my contact information to NCEA. Thank you so very much. I've really enjoyed my time with you today, and take care.